Hey readers, I am Mrs. Sitton. I teach reading and writing for 5th grade, and I'm really excited to read chapter 29 of Cryptid Hunters by Roland Smith with you today. Let's go ahead and get started. Grace and Marty had been following the parrot for half an hour. "I think this parrot's crazy," Marty said. He looked at his watch. 15 minutes, then we head to the sky house on our own. I'm starving. Grace did not argue. She was getting hungry too. 5 minutes later, Marty said, "Do you smell that?" Yes. The stench was impossible to ignore. "It smells like Butch's camp." "We're a long way from there," Marty said. They walked a little farther and stopped at a small stream. Marty pointed to a tree on the other side with several well-fed vultures perched in it. "I think there's a snack bar somewhere around here." Grace was not interested in the vultures. She turned around. The parrot was perched in a tree about 10 feet to their left. She walked over to it. The parrot ruffled its feathers and started preening. Marty joined her. "What's going on?" "This is the tree," Grace said. "What are you talking about?" Grace sat down next to the tree and told him how her mother had been killed and how Wolf had lost his leg. "All these years, I thought it was a nightmare, but it really happened. My mother set me in the branches of this tree. She crossed the stream there," she pointed. Makole Membe came out of those bushes to the right. I think it was the flash from her camera that made it mad. It picked her up." Grace covered her face and began to sob. Marty held her hand for a while, then stood up. "Let's cross over and take a closer look." Grace shook her head. "You've come this far," Marty said. "You might as well finish it. We're not going to be back here anytime soon. If you don't look now, you'll regret it." Reluctantly, Grace followed him across the shallow stream, with the vultures looking on. "This is far enough," Wolf said, taking his pack off and sitting down. Laurel sat down next to him. Wolf consulted his gizmo. "If Marty's information is accurate, they're waiting for us here." He pointed to the land bridge. "It's the only way through this area." "We could go around," Laurel said. "That would take at least another day, which we don't have. Blackwood's on his way, and I'm worried about Mazzelito. He didn't follow these guys for the fun of it. He'll try to take them out, and he might get hurt in the process. The original reason for this trip was to protect him. I suspect he's somewhere on the other side of the gap, trying to figure out what to do." "What do you suggest?" "Actually, Grace gave me the idea." He took a leather case out of his pack and unzipped it. Inside was a pistol. "You can't fight them with that," Laurel protested. "I don't intend to fight them," Wolf said. "I'm going to put them to sleep. This is a tranquilizer gun." "Why did you bring a tranquilizer gun?" "Makole Membe. I was under the impression that you didn't believe—" "Not entirely," Wolf confessed. "A cryptozoologist can't afford to be completely skeptical." He patted his back. "I also brought along everything a veterinarian might need to treat an ailing dinosaur." "What do you want me to do?" "If they start firing, I want you to run through that gap as fast as you can." "And leave you by yourself?" Laurel protested. "One of us has to get through, and I hate to admit it, but you're better in the woods than I am. You have the best chance of reaching Grace and Marty. Also, I don't speak pygmy. You do. You're the only one who can explain what's going on." Laurel held his gaze for a moment. Uncomfortable, Wolf looked back down at the gizmo and checked the vidcam. He swore. Butch was looking at the ground, his bald head in sharp contrast to the greenery surrounding him. "He's tracking them," Wolf said grimly, and quickly checked Vid's location. "And if he's close to Grace and Marty, they're still a long way from the sky house." Almost as if he could hear, Butch looked directly up at Vid and gave him a broad smile, waved, and then walked out of the camera's view. "This is where Makole Membe came out?" Marty asked. He was on his knees in front of the wall of vines Grace had pointed to. "Yes," Grace said, "and you're making me a little nervous sitting in front of it like that. Nothing bigger than a duker has come through here in years. It's all overgrown, but this is where the horrible smell is coming from. At least it's a lot stronger down here than it is anywhere else." The gizmo rang. He took it out of his pocket. "What are you doing?" Wolf asked. "You should be at the sky house by now. Butch is on your trail." "Where is he?" Marty asked with alarm. "I'm not sure, but we just saw him on the vidcam. Vid isn't—" Cork. Vid landed right next to him and looked up at the vultures with suspicion. "Gotta go," Marty said, stuffing the gizmo into his pocket. He stood and listened. He didn't hear anything unusual, but that didn't mean Butch wasn't close. The parrot flew from the tree on the other side of the stream, landed next to Vid, and bit him. Vid flew away. "We have to get out of here." "Which way?" Marty looked down at the vines where the smell was coming from. "We'll hide in here until the coast is clear. After you." A few days earlier, there was no way Grace would have gone first. She squeezed through the vines on her hands and knees. Grace had a much easier time wriggling through the brush than Marty did. She emerged from the tangle several minutes before her cousin and found herself in a sculpted tunnel of vines and branches. Light filtered through the dome ceiling like sunlight, flowing through cut glass in a cathedral. The ground had been packed hard and was clear of growth, as if it had been weeded. It was so beautiful that she nearly forgot the terrible stench. Their father's backpack came through the vines, followed by Marty's arms, head, and shoulders. Grace took his hands and helped pull him free. The parrot hopped through right after him. "This wasn't one of my better ideas," he said, brushing a spider off his face. "I don't know," Grace said. "At least we're safe from Butch in here." Marty stood and was just as impressed with their surroundings as Grace. "I've never seen anything like it. In fact, I've never heard of anything like it." He looked up at the domed ceiling. "I guess the tunnel was made by Mokala Membe. After all these years, you'd think it would be a little more grown." "A lot more overgrown," Grace said nervously. Marty put the pack on. "At least Big M hasn't used this as an exit in a while." "What should we do?" "I wish Bo were here," Marty said. "This is a perfect job for a scout." They started down the tunnel. "This is where we part company," Wolf whispered. He and Laurel were hiding behind a fallen tree. He pointed to the narrow land bridge. "They're up there somewhere. I'm going to go straight ahead. I want you to swing to the right and wait. When you hear the commotion, run through the gap." "I still think—" "I'll be fine," Wolf interrupted. "They expect us to come pounding through here like a couple of elephants. I'll have the tranquilizer dart in them before they know what happened. As soon as they're out, I'll catch up with you and Mausolito." Laurel gave him a hug, then began working her way to the right. Wolf took his pack off and began filling the darts with tranquilizer. The dart pistol was virtually silent, but he knew he would only have a chance for 2 shots, perhaps 3. He wished that tranquilizers worked like they did in the movies, with the animal collapsing as soon as it was hit, but the truth was that it took time, 10 to 15 minutes for the drug to take effect. This meant he would have to stay concealed or run until the men were down. His preparations were interrupted by the loud roar of a jet passing overhead. "What was that?" Grace asked. "Sounded like a jet," Marty said, hoping that's all it was. "It was loud." "Yeah," Marty's voice was a little shaky. "Do you remember what Makola Membe sounds like?" "Yes," Grace answered, "but it didn't sound anything like that." Marty breathed a sigh of relief. "Where's the parrot?" "Up ahead somewhere." They continued down the twisting vine tunnel, which was much longer than they thought it would be. Wolf crept forward. Every 20 feet he stopped for several minutes to watch and listen. The closer he got to the bridge, the more he worried. What if they were waiting on the other side? What if they were hiding in the swamp, waiting for them to cross? If they were on the other side, he wouldn't be able to reach them. The effective range of a tranquilizer pistol was only about 30 feet. And what about Grace and Marty? Had Butch caught up with them? He was tempted to check in on them, but now wasn't the time. Why hadn't he thought to bring more batteries with him? He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He knew better than to let his mind wander during a stalk. He crawled forward a few more feet, then stopped. At first he did not recognize the sound. It came from his left, subtle but persistent. Cards, he thought. Someone is shuffling a deck of playing cards. He crawled towards the sound very slowly and picked up the faint smell of cigarette smoke. "Just deal," a man said in French. "When they're shuffled," a second man responded. They were sitting across from each other with a flat rock between them. Wolf was too far away for a clean shot. He worked his way around toward a large moss-covered log to their right, taking his time, stopping every couple feet to make sure they hadn't heard him. Their guns were leaned up against a tree out of easy reach. The pistol only held 1 dart at a time. He would have to reload between shots. He hoped he would have time before they got to the shotguns. He finally reached the log. Beneath it was an opening, just big enough for him to stick the pistol through. He slipped a dart into the breech and held the other dart in his teeth. Cork, cork, cork. Butch looked up irritably at the raven and the vultures, then squatted in front of where Marty and Grace had crawled through the tightly packed vines. "It would take me hours to cut my way through there," he sniffed the air. "Something dead. Big and dead. And it didn't get in there the same way the brats had crawled." He glanced back up at the vultures. 4 of them. Where there are 4, there are dozens. Butch set off to find the rest of them. Felipe jumped up and screamed. His cards went flying. "Quiet!" Jacques hissed. "They'll hear us." "I've been bitten by a snake!" Philip screamed. "Where?" Jackie started looking around in a panic. A snake could bite 2 people as easily as it could 1. He started toward his shotgun, but stopped when a searing pain erupted from the back of his thigh. He reached down and ripped the barbed dart out. "It's not a snake," he said, holding the aluminum shaft out for Philip to see. Philip stopped, jumping around, and stared at the shaft, then reached back and pulled the dart out of his butt. As enjoyable as the scene was, Wolf did not stick around to see any more. As soon as they got over the shock, they would come looking for him. He backed away from the log, hoping the distraction had been enough for Laurel to slip over the bridge. Oh, wow. Goodness, I'm excited to read the rest. Thank you guys for reading with me today. Bye, everybody.